Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night and decided it was time to use the bathroom? So, without turning on the light, you head towards the bathroom. And before you know it, you step on something sharp or you stub your toe. It happens to all of us. And why does it happen? The lack of visibility, the darkness. This is why we stepped on something when we could have avoided it. If only we had turned on the light, if only we had visibility. The same thing happens in our networks. The lack of visibility leads to issues on the security side and overall. Visibility is a foundation in security. And in this series, we're going to talk about Cisco Identity Services Engine. Visibility is key. How do we know that that device that's joining our network is healthy? What do we know about this device? What are they doing? Who is the owner? Are they the real owner who owns that device? These are all important questions that need to be answered. And this is why network access control is important. Having a policy on the network for the devices that are joining is important. Having something that talks to other devices in the ecosystem, other security solutions, is important. Visibility starts with Cisco ISE. And that is what this series is about. Cisco Identity Services Engine. Let's jump into it. I spent years as a network engineer using Cisco ISE, but I was not using all of Cisco ISE's capabilities. And the goal here in this video series is to talk about those different capabilities that you can take advantage of, to take a look at those different use cases that Cisco ISE applies to. There is so much you can do. Again, I was not taking advantage of all those capabilities. I was only doing authentication, which is just scratching the surface of what you can do with network access control, with something that can apply policy to devices across your network. That is Cisco ISE. Now, there are different ways to deploy Cisco ISE. I have it running as a VM in my lab in Proxmox, but there are other ways that you can deploy Cisco ISE. You might have dedicated appliances, SNS appliances in your environment that are running the different personas for Cisco ISE. And we'll talk about that momentarily. You could be running it in the cloud. That's another way that you can run Cisco ISE, and you can have some of those components, some of those personas in the cloud as well to do something on-prem and in the cloud. So the deployment that you have will vary depending on the size in your environment as well. The amount of nodes you'll need in your environment depends on how many endpoints you have that will be authenticating across the network around the world. So it can vary. Now, in my environment here at home in the lab, it's a very small environment. If we take a look at the deployment here, we'll see that this single ISE VM that I have is doing everything. Administration, monitoring, policy, which is the PSN, that is where authentication happens, and PX Grid as well, which is the connectivity, the sharing of information to other third-party devices or solutions, or even within the Cisco ecosystem. And we'll talk about that shortly as well. But this is not the way that you would set up production. You would have different nodes with the different personas doing different things in your environment, redundant in different data centers or in the cloud. But for my lab, this is perfect. And most likely, if you're getting into Cisco ISE, you will set up like a standalone setup just like I have here with one node doing everything just so you can play around with Cisco ISE. It's perfect for the lab. So what are the different nodes, the different personas that are out there in your deployment? Well, you have an administration node. That is where the fun happens. That's where changes happen. That's where you administer your deployment. That's where you take care of things. Then you have the monitoring and troubleshooting, the MNT. That is a separate node for logging and for reporting. That's where you're doing your detective work in. Then you also have the ever important PSN, the policy services node. That is the authentication that is happening. That's where devices go and authenticate. You'll have different PSNs in your environment depending on how many endpoints are authenticating. So that is a good conversation for your account team and for the security folks to have. How many PSNs do you need in your environment? What does that redundancy look like? That's where the policy magic happens. Then you also have PX Grid, the sharing of context, the sharing of information to other third parties or to other Cisco products. Because keep in mind, what ISE is doing is turning that light on, letting you see what is happening on the network, and you can take action on that. And that action might be a third party product or it might be another Cisco product, but you might want to send out an alert. You might want to change a firewall rule. You might want to do something with what you see in your environment. That's where PX Grid comes in. What about the licensing? Well, it depends on the features, on the use cases that you're looking for. It depends on the box that you're trying to check on the security side of the house. If you're just looking for authentication, radius, an essentials license would be enough. However, you're going to want to do more with Cisco ISE. What about the health of your endpoints? Are they jailbroken? Are they following your security policies? What is the posture of those devices? You want to take action on those devices depending on the posture. That is where a Premier license comes in. And the Premier license, though, will also include everything else below. So all the advantage and the essentials is nested into the Premier license. But again, depending on what you're trying to accomplish on the security side of the house, will depend on the license that you would move forward with. And we're going to talk about these different licenses more in the future. We're going to talk about these features. There's a lot of great features that you can take advantage of. TrustSec is definitely something you should be looking at, especially if you want to apply policy to the identity and you want that policy, that tag, to follow that identity throughout the network. And you want to enforce different things along the way, different policies along the way. TrustSec will be important. So there is so much that you can do with Cisco ISE depending on the license that you have as well. In the quest for zero trust, organizations need visibility. Organizations need to turn on the light. That way they don't step on the Lego piece in the middle of the night. So it's important to have network access control. It's important to have something that will give you information on the devices that are connecting to the network. And that is where Cisco ISE comes in. And if you have Cisco ISE in your environment, take a look at what you're not doing with Cisco ISE, because I'm sure that list is pretty lengthy. And that's the goal, is to talk about the things that you are not doing with Cisco ISE. And let's play around, let's spend some time in the lab, and let's have some fun together. I'll see you on the next one.